Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to all of you who have tuned in on this wonderful show today. But welcome to our World View TV talk show. And we're grateful today to be back with you to share some inspirations and insights on this wonderful show talking about the psychospiritual insights to movies. To, we have a wonderful guest with us, two guests with us on today. We have a different movie we want to talk about, but we have with us to my right is Pastor Larry Camp from the Bethlehem Baptist Church, and to my left is the returning champion, Minister Nicholas Lee from Metropolitan Baptist Church, and we're grateful to have them with us on today. We want to look at this show, which is a controversial show to many. It's a show that is on Netflix, a movie on Netflix that we probably would just overlook as a stereotypical type of a movie. But there's some jewels and nuggets in this movie we wanted to talk about that's pertinent for these times. And the movie title is They Cloned Tyrone. I know some of you in the audience are like, oh my goodness, he's not. Yes, They Cloned Tyrone. It is on Netflix only, as far as I know. It was written and by Tony Redham Neimer. I might be pronouncing his name wrong as well. Also co-written by Jewel Tyler, and Jewel is also the director to this movie. And we want to dig into what this movie brings to us from a psychospiritual approach. And so I'm glad to have our guests. I'm going to ask if they would just uh, give a little bit about themselves. I'm going to start with Pastor Camp and just give us a background quickly of who you are and what's your main focal point as pastor of Bethlehem Baptist Church. And then I'm going to come to Minister Nick.
Yeah, it's my name is Larry Camp, pastor of the Bethlehem Baptist Church in East New York, Brooklyn, affectionately known as the Bethlehem Nation, and we refer to it as the Bethlehem Nation, based on the fact that the Bible tells us that we would be a nation of people, and so we've been in the East New York area. Come February, will be approximately 35 years. And we try to impact the community. The community basically has a history, even going back so far as to Al Capone, born and raised there before he moved to Chicago. That is not to suggest that our church is a gangster church, but it's to let you really know about how that community is and how we wish to impact that community, which we have impacted that community as it relates to the drugs and as it relates to the affliction of people that are there.
All right. Thank you. I'm just honored to be here. I'm Nicholas Lee, born and raised in East New York, Brooklyn, New York, heavily influenced by my aunt Nicole, who's sainted memory now, and I have to shout her out. I serve at both the Metropolitan Baptist Church and the Brotherhood Baptist Church. I'm just trying to embody what it means to not only have church, but to be the church. And I am a black seminarian at the greatest seminary on this side of heaven, the Samuel Dewar Proctor School of Theology at Virginia Union. And I'm just honored to be here yet again.
And if you don't know who I am, I'm not only just the guest host, but I'm Mzidi Amathi. I am the pastor of Wayside Baptist Church in Brooklyn, in the area that's like Eden. It has 4 streams of different parts of Brooklyn, for we literally have been connected to from the way we're situated. As part of Ocean Hill, Brownsville, part of East New York, part of Bedford-Stuyvesant, and when we cross the street on Broadway, we're in Bushwick. Yeah. And so I'd say we're the church with 4 streams. But we are here. I'm grateful to have our guests with us today because this is a very interesting topic pertaining to this movie. As I first stated, it is a movie that many of us will overlook as trash because the movie is stereotypical in the black culture with the malt liquor and the and gang banging and the prostitution and the partying and et cetera, et cetera. But we oftentimes have to be able as leaders to look beyond the superficial and see the depths of people and who we're ministering to. Jesus, it reminds me of when he said to the disciples, "Come with me, I'll make you become fishers of men." We oftentimes as clergy talk about how when they cast their net out that they do not have the choice as to what fish they gather. They pull in all kind of fish. We like to say that, but we don't like to deal with that. We deal with all types of people, of all backgrounds, of all situations, and how do we reach them and understand what their story is that can bring light to our story and the story of Christ that they need in order to go forward. And so this is one of those movies that is unassuming, but is bringing something to the table, not just from a racial epithet perspective, is even though it's predominantly a movie of what they were doing to the black culture, but it's also something we have to look at it as a black culture on how we promulgate stereotypes and ignorance and, as Dr. King once said, conscientious stupidity. How we promulgate it within our cultures, societies, and even our churches. And so I want to get started on this by just kind of passing this through. Based on this movie that we've seen, what is your take? And either one of you can answer that first. What is your take? What is this movie trying to really say to us? What does it say? What did we get from it?
Well, I'll start off. When I was watching the movie, the entire movie, I was reminded of stories of many children when they're young and they cry out to their parents, "There's a monster under my bed."
Mm-hmm.
There's always something that feels as if it's underneath us, that is a threat to us, even though we can't see it. Literally, that was the movement. The base of those that work for the government were underneath them. It was those proverbial monsters under the bed. And although they couldn't see them, they heard about them, or the access points for some of those monsters were closets, were lockers, all in the movies. So they would use those as elevators.
Yes.
So I immediately thought about the whole "there's a monster under my bed." That's what I thought about it at first. And because the reality is, with all the troublings that we know and are unknown that the government may have done and are doing to us, we feel it, but we can't describe it until we are put in a place to call it what it is. So I think that's monsters are under my bed. That's what I was first grasped with watching the entire movie.
Okay.
I thought when I first saw it, how can anybody lighten this movie up? Everything is dark, which goes back really to Minister Lee's point. There's a monster under the bed. It seemed to me, looking at that movie, that there was an overlapping of decades. The 70s overlapped into the 80s. The 80s overlapped into the 90s. The 90s overlapped into the 2000s. And because, first of all, when I say overlap, we see the afros in some.
Yes.
We see the malt liquor in others. We see the way of dress in another. We hear the dialogue by one saying they're a pimp. There seemed to be an overlap of decades. And as I was watching that movie, it's, they say that it's a comedy, which it was. It had funny moments, but I wouldn't even call it a comedy. I would just call it something where it was a message where we had to pay attention to the overlap and how it affected each generation. It was hard for me to decipher exactly which decade was this in, and then that's when I realized there was so much overlapping in it. But it also talked about, as you said, Pastor Hamathia, the stereotypes of literally of each generation. It was a stereotype of each generation. There was the part in the hair,
Yes.
Jamie Foxx.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we had the other brother with his, what I call Jimmy Butler hairdo. Jimmy Butler, who plays for the Miami Heat. And so you had that with the differences of hairstyle, with the differences of dress, the dialogue of the young lady. So it gave me, and I go back to Minister Lee's point, there's a monster under the bed which every generation experience. And so if there's a monster under the bed, which affected my own daughters when they were young, which has affected sometimes my granddaughter as she looks at mosquitoes. So there was an overlapping of various things that caused this movie to be interesting. I think that Rod Serling would be proud if he saw something like this. David Fincher, who directed The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, they all would be fans of this in certain kind of ways. It's saying something, but you get a target what it's saying.
Yeah. There was a scene, I'm going to dive right into it. There was a scene in the movie where, and we know one of the persons in the movie was, Tyrone was his name, but before that, his name was Fontaine. Yeah, and Fontaine, if you remember the beginning part of the movie, Fontaine will be coming out of the store, the bodega store, after he did the scratching match. And it took me 3 times to catch this. I was a little slow to this. I had to watch the movie 3 times just to catch what was going on. I still don't fully grasp it. The older gentleman, homeless black fella, sitting outside asking for something to drink, which was really, he wanted some liquor. Fontaine would come out with the malt liquor, the Coke 45. I said, wow, that just dated me back. The Coke 45, or was it Old English? And the Old English, and he pours it into his cup. But then every time that scene comes back around, kind of like that of what Bill Murray played in Groundhog Day, the scene kept coming back around, and it's different each time. I noticed each time that scene came around, something was different from what the old man was saying and the measure of liquor that was going in the cup. I would have been a detective. If I didn't become a pastor, I probably would have been a detective. I like detecting details. And I was shocked I had to see this 3 times to catch it. The first time, you notice, he poured a little bit in the cup. The second time, he would change the saying, and he poured more in his cup. But I think the third time when he was finally catching it, I don't want to get that far down yet, but he poured more in the cup, but the old man's saying kept changing. And I'll come back to that later. But I want to focus in on, what do you all think was going on? Because there's subliminal messages coming in with Fontaine coming in, constantly coming back to this bodega, the store, neighborhood store. The emphasis is constantly on the scratching match and constantly on the old man he's talking to when he comes out. What's your take on it? What do you think they're trying to depict from that?
The first thing the old man says where he says, it's in the water, which reminded me of Flint, Michigan, of course.
Wow.
But then growing up in Brooklyn, in the Williamsburg section of Brooklyn, I used to hear some of the older brothers talk about everything is controlled. Everything is controlled, everything is manipulated. So in the various sayings, you're absolutely right, Pastor. But the thing that I paid attention to was it's in the water, and the second thing I got out of that is that he was being somewhat prophetic without trying to be prophetic.
Absolutely.
And by being prophetic, he was letting him know about a warning, to which the man that was pouring the liquor, Fontaine was pouring the liquor, wasn't paying attention to because he seemed the least of somebody who to listen to.
Right.
In fact, while he was pouring the liquor, he really wasn't listening to him. He was just pouring the liquor.
Right.
That brings, for me, a theological implication to it that sometimes prophecies are indeed articulated, but people are not necessarily paying attention to it because of how the person looks, or the person's lifestyle, or how they may be coming up and they look the least among us.
Yeah.
So they ignore the message because they're paying too much attention to the messenger.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he doesn't look like much.
Right.
Which, of course, and excuse me for going this way, Pastor, Jesus didn't look like much when he came.
Absolutely.
He did not come with rich chariots, sandals. There was nothing about Jesus that looked impressive, not
Right.
one thing that looked impressive. Yet he was pouring out these words to people. And sometimes, even when they were not listening, he would still pour them out. And sometimes they did not ask him anything, and he didn't respond. So it could be that Jesus felt they wasn't interested. So I'll save my message for another date, another hour, or another person. So
Right. Nick, what?
Oh, to be overlooked and forgotten. I immediately thought about how we treat the quote-unquote homeless members on our corner stores as if they don't know anything, but really they can see all and see everyone, so they know the ins and outs of what's going on in the community by just sitting where they are. And to Pastor Camp's point, I did think about Jesus and also thought about David in 1 Samuel chapter 16, who wasn't even brought up to his own coronation, as per se. So he's out there working, doing his thing in the field, dirty, hanging out with the sheep, not even realizing that Samuel has come to sort of anoint him for this moment. And he had such a prophetic witness. This homeless man sitting there had such a prophetic witness, and every time he spoke, it was so prophetic. And if they would have caught it, they would have probably avoided some of the things they would have. Jamie probably would have never got stuck in the van during that scene. So I was amazed about how we overlook members of society who don't look like us, who we think are less than, and meanwhile they know more than we do that's going on in our communities.
Right.
That really resonated with me, and we can't overlook those that don't have the right appearance per se. So,
And we're going to park right there for a little longer. Because in church we have that challenge with youth and young adults being overlooked. And I'm speaking from experience. It wasn't directly as harsh as it seems to be now. But when I was growing up, I had Pastor Camp who embraced me as a teenage preacher. And I was a prodigy preacher at the time because there wasn't too many young preachers in the 80s that was 14. I didn't have a comrade at 14 at all in the Baptist church. The oldest young preacher that I knew was about 29 years old. But I have experienced the issues of, upon entering certain churches to preach, I was overlooked. Come in 14, 15, even when I got my early 20s, I would come in, and back then, you better have a robe with you if you were ordained. Now, when I wasn't ordained, I come in my suit. Don't come in here looking like I do now with no tie on and no suit jacket. You getting kicked out. But I was overlooked in a lot of churches until they found out I was the preacher. And that always troubled me through my years. And some people would say, well, that doesn't make sense. Why does that affect you so badly? Because I had something to offer that would have been ignored based on people's presumptions and pre-notions of what a young person offers. And it made me begin that when I started pastoring, never to leave young people relegated to just the usher board and the choir stand. Till I literally had he wasn't my godson at the time, but my baby godson, I got in, a lot of folks upset with me at the first church I pastored because I put him on the drums at 4 years old. 4. What this little baby gonna do it for? But he showed them, and he played the drum. And so we oftentimes overlooking that. I'm gonna get a little deeper on that. The danger of overlooking, that might preach somewhere in there. The danger of overlooking. This is why I believe you have like Hamas and all these other radical people in the East, where they go and they get, even here in the West, where drug dealers and everyone would go use children because they know we overlook children. Yeah. In the eastern side of the world, a child will blow you up. Yeah. But we always, oh, they're so innocent. No, they will blow you up because we overlook. In overlooking, the danger to it is, and I'm going to get to my point, but this is like really burning in me. The danger to overlooking, folks, based on our preconceived notions, can cause a lot of catastrophe that didn't have to be said. The most dangerous person in a kingdom is not the wife. It's not the commander or chief of the command or the general, not even the king. Mm-hmm. The most dangerous person known to a kingdom is the gesture, the clown. Mm-hmm. He can get closest to the king with no one paying attention to him. And in church, we usually overlook the loud, rabble-rousing, ignorant appearing person in church. Set him down, move him out the way. Mm-hmm. That's the most dangerous one. It was the one who yelled out, "Get your hands out my pocket." Yeah. That took the attention off of the plot. Mm-hmm. When they assassinated Malcolm X. So we have to begin now to revisit how we view folks. Mm-hmm. It was the children that was brought to Jesus that the disciples X'd out. That Jesus said, they're more important than you. Mm-hmm. Except you come as little children, not so much from the age, but from the heart of the matter. Yep. Except ye come as little children, you won't even see the kingdom in heaven. Mm-hmm. Those who we overlook are the ones who has the most potent message to us. Absolutely. And that's what that old man was in. And there was a few of those throughout the movie. Mm-hmm. Those little side pieces that we would ignore and things like that, you just overlook. But that's why Jesus said it's the small foxes that destroys the vine. Mm-hmm. And we're always looking at the big stuff. Mm-hmm. It's the small foxes. You can have a mega church, but people would leave based on your attitude. Yeah. You can have a small building and people would join based on your attitude. And that's the important part. So I did my commentary for that. But as I watch, and I am going to sneak this part in, I'm going to jump to this end part for a second, because I need to focus on this old man again. Because this blew my mind. Towards the end of the movie, when Fontaine's eyes was open, when he became woke, notice what the old man said to him again after he got shot and replaced and went through the whole thing the last time. He came out, did the same thing, poured in. Before he came over with the liquor, the old man said, you smell like a new car. And that hit me. You smell like a new car. It hit me because in seeing the plot, Fontaine now has a new attitude, new focal point, and he still didn't quite get it towards what the old man was throwing at him. But I got it, what the old man was throwing, like,
and he got shot up and his car was damaged early on.
Yes. So it's like, oh, I get it now. And when I don't really like using that term, but it's going to fit right now. When he became woke, that's what I keep quoting it, air quoting it, became woke. A lot of times, the most dangerous situation we can face is when we were ignored or been ignoring others that we should have paid attention to, and then we become woke. Now we become a threat and public enemy number one. How do we, as leaders, navigate through those type of waters? No, it's not.
Well, I want to go back to something you brought up during our community formation at the seminary. I was assigned to a group, and of course my topic was inclusion. Now, during the inclusion, they were talking about, of course, women preachers. They said, we got to mention that. They said LGBTQIA members, we have to mention them. And then they just stopped there. I said, well, wait, there's a community you're forgetting, and that's the young people. So I have to go back and highlight that, because so many times young people have been given the roles of 4 Sundays a year, sometimes 5, only to do work. So when you exclude them, you create rebellion, resistance, and I'm staying home. I don't want to come. I think many leaders, the role of the leader has to be that of Paul to Timothy, where he told him, "Let no man despise thy youth,
Right.
but be thou an example." He said 6 ways in the King James Version: in word, in conversation, in faith, in charity, in spirit, and in purity. So we have to learn how to encourage our youth to not forget about them as leaders, because so many times I even felt growing up that I was forgotten, I was overlooked, I didn't have anything that I was able to do, or I was relegated to just the ushers board. I was given a little sermonette opportunity, but when
baby and sang song.
and you're doing all right. Meanwhile, I kind of had more to say than many other people, or I kind of knew more because I took it seriously. So if we want to create a sort of generational spiritual wealth, not just generational physical wealth, generational spiritual wealth, we have to invest, I believe, in the youth primarily. We can't focus on their right now because they haven't experienced their not yet, as the Dr. Charlie Dates would say. So once we prepare them for right now, where they are, don't judge them by where they are, what they're doing. If we cultivate them, we can create strong Christians. And that goes to my ministry. I want to create a Christian school where we're raising up generational leaders that will continue the legacy of the Black church specifically. That's what leaders have to do, and invest in spiritual generational wealth.
Yeah, I remember there's a quote by Charlie Parker, who used to play the saxophone back in the 40s and 50s. Says that if you're going to play the horn, you got to love the horn. And we talk about inclusiveness and exclusion. For instance, Yo-Yo in the movie. Yo-Yo was that blue hair, and they called her Yo-Yo because she can go down and come back up. And Yo-Yo was kind of the progenitor of Red Top in American Gangster with Denzel Washington. And so Yo-Yo, even though she would do all this profane language, noticed more than the brothers did. I mean, if you are, in her case, since she was a prostitute, of course she knows different characters. She knows the way they think. She knows the money that they pay. And so as a result of that, Jamie Foxx would refer to her as a hoe, overlooking her, whereas she had been in the streets and is familiar with the streets. So that goes back to the point of how characters are overlooked, including Yo-Yo. Characters are formulated in the minds of pimps who see her as a commodity and a merchandise rather than to see her as someone who is a thinker as it relates to the community itself. Now, Minister Lee talked about building things for the community with young people, and all of that is important. And so building that in the community, there has to be a daring thinking in which you have to see people for as they are and who they are, and to remember who you were.
Right.
Yes.
You know, and I think that comes into the base of what I refer to as theological implication. That goes into the basics of it. Henceforth, going back to Charlie Parker, if you're gonna play the horn, you got to love the horn.
Right.
And I think that plays into it, and these multiple characters that we have seen throughout this movie. Great movie, I would say. I mean, I had to watch it 2 times just to understand. I just wish I could have lightened it up, because the whole, I don't know, you probably have better television than I do. Everything was dark.
Yeah, it was dark.
Everything was dark.
Yeah.
Even my wife said, "Can't you lighten it up some more?" So she got frustrated and walked out of it.
But you know, and I think that's what kept putting me to sleep, because I watched this and I kept passing out to sleep to it.
Well, isn't that interesting though?
Yeah, yeah, because, and it is interesting because I think that was purpose, that it was dark.
Yeah.
Paul says we see through a glass darkly, and some translations say dimly.
Yeah.
We're navigating through this world system darkly. Everything that we're experiencing even today, we're experiencing things one-sided. And depending on what side we're taking the information from. If you want to be on the Democratic side, you turn to Democratic news channels and you get the Democratic perspective on it. If you're a Republican, you turn to Fox, did I say that aloud? And you get the Republican view to it. It's who's narrating the information and what their aim and goal is. We're walking through this system, seeing things dimly. And we as leaders have to be able now to remember who he made us to be. Not just leaders, but leaders to remind children of God. He said, and now I get why he said it, we are the light of the world. Because we're navigating through this world darkly. The world is dark. Our understanding is dark. And we have to be able to produce light into a dark world. And because we haven't been able to do that well, they're literally doing things under our noses that we don't see clear enough. The arduous fights that took place during COVID in the church world was frightening to me. When the rest of the world got up, 2021, 2022, shook the dust off and said, we're going back to do business as usual, the church was still hiding in the walls of their houses and I'm not trying to disrespect anybody, but I saw it as hiding. When we're the ones who said, we walk by faith, not by sight, and again, it's not a criticism, it's an observation. We're the ones who's been teaching. So in other words, everything we've taught, we did just the opposite. When the world took what we taught and moved in it. So the world was open for quote unquote what we call the world. The world was open when the church were hiding. And as the church was hiding, the world became darker. And to the point where as it became dark, we fall in the category what Paul said in Corinthians 15:32, when he talked about eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. And we have a lot of folks, I hate to say, I'm not bashing the church, but since this is psychospiritual, from the spiritual aspect, that's walking darkly based on what the world has taught the church to believe in versus us teaching the world what we believe in, until we're excited about the eating and drinking, but forget we got to die too.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the woke part that I saw in the movie. So I go to the next part that I saw in the movie where Jamie Foxx and all of them was they went to the restaurant, they went to the chicken place to get something to eat. And it's funny, they would go to a chicken place. Went to the chicken place, and when they went to the chicken place, Jamie noticed, he's the pimp, y'all, in the movie now. Jamie noticed that Fontaine, who's the drug dealer in the movie, he said, all the years I've known you, all of them started laughing, and Jamie said, wait, all the years I know you, I've never ever seen you laugh, never seen you smile. And it was, and then Jamie said, whoa, wait a minute now. Then it hit him. I've never seen you smile. And that's when it struck him. And then he knocked all the chicken off the table.
Yeah.
Notice something though. All the people that were laughing and smiling in the restaurant stopped when he knocked the food off the table. And then seconds, they went back in business as usual.
Yeah.
As if nothing ever happened. What's your take on that?
That was a reawakening, but it was a reawakening for them for what? What they were so used to, eating chicken, having a biscuit, and what grabbed their attention was the guy knocks the box of chicken over.
You don't do that.
And then everyone stopped, and again I go back to Yo-Yo having to explain everything. I mean, so that was my take on it, that it was a reawakening, but for them a reawakening to what? You know, when you are woke, but now what? It
Right.
becomes a now what? I'm up, but now what? I got up this morning, now what? If there's no plan when you get up, but you're awake anyway, now what?
Right.
So the thing is to go back to sleep, which is what I think that many of them they went back to sleep, not on that scene, but they went back
Right.
to a chicken place
Right.
anyway,
Right.
because they woke up. Now what?
Absolutely.
That's powerful. It's interesting to me. Jamie Foxx, aka Slick Charles,
That was his
Slick
name.
movie, he was the one who had that reawakening moment because he's the one that had a smell or a taste of the powder when they first went into the lab.
Right.
So it's interesting to me. He experienced what they were already experiencing, and it shook him up. And if you remember, he was smiling and laughing, trying to be serious as he was holding up the gun to the first lab assistant, if you may call him that.
Right.
So he had previously experienced that smiling effect. And then when he's eating it, he notices it first. Why? Because he's experienced it. So.
Right.
But exactly what you said, Pastor Kemp. What now? Kevin Hart special. What now? What do you do now? What am I gonna do at this point?
Right.
And I think it was encouraging to see Yo-Yo take the initiative after of that now to go and use her skills, if you want to call them, to seduce into seeing the operation base at the chicken restaurant. And as a black Baptist pastor, you know, fried chicken, you don't throw it anywhere. You got to eat it. So you catch the attention of the people.
Yeah.
But since they're all asleep, since they're all under sort of hypnosis, if you will, they'll go back to what they were doing.
Right.
Yeah.
And you mentioned about with the black Baptist, the black church part. In different parts of this movie, they were being awakened at the familiar places black people go.
Yeah.
So the first part, when they was awakened, when they first discovered the lab, was in a trap house,
Yeah.
which for the millennials, they know that more than you and me, Reverend Camp. You know, trap house is, they have trap music, and it's a place where they party at. That's when they first was awakened.
Yep.
The second time was at the chicken place. The third time was at church.
Yeah.
But that was also the interesting part with the older man who kept giving, because now Fontaine started to catch on. Then he came back to the older guy at the store and said, "Hey, tell me what's going on." And the man gave it code again. And he was like, "No, man, brother, you know," he mentioned, "Oh, you got to go to church." No, he he's sitting in church. And so now he has Yo-Yo with him. And they go, there's a whole lot of churches here. And he says, "What church you talking about?" He says, "Where do you go when you're escaping Babylon?" And then they show that they went to Zion.
Yeah.
I said, "Oh my God, this is something powerful here." Because when you track it in scriptures, then when they was in Babylon and then Persians took over and went from Medes and Persians, it was Nehemiah who gets the request to go back to Zion. I said, "Oh my God, they got this thing down pat." But when they go to church, and I want to hang on this part as we're getting to the end of this, because this is the psychospiritual challenge at its best. It's in church. I'm preaching tomorrow and dealing with what we hear. Pay attention to what we hear. And tying in with the understanding of, in the temptation of Jesus, Satan took Jesus to church. And I preached that one time before. When Satan took Jesus to church, we oftentimes think that Satan doesn't come to church. That's why we run to church hoping everything's going to be all right.
Yeah.
Satan hangs out at church. Satan hangs out at heaven. Nobody told us to think Satan can't go to heaven. Job makes it clear that he ends up going to heaven freely. Nobody kicked him out. God doesn't even ask him why he's in heaven.
No,
He asks him, "What are you doing?"
Yeah. That's right.
So we overlook the fact that somewhere or another he has access to heaven in ways we didn't think. When they get to church, it's interesting that before they even get to the elevator in church, which they had to wait till service was over to get to that. That's another point that's interesting. They get in and go in during church service time. And it's in the black church where we're used to being emotional. And in the black church where the pastor's preaching, but it wasn't the preaching that got Jamie's attention. And what's his name?
Slick Charles.
Slick Charles.
Yeah.
In the movie, it wasn't the preaching that got his attention. It was the way service went. And so the way service went, Jamie says, Slick Charles says, which goes to show you, give rise to the idea, even those who are pimps, prostitutes, and drug dealers was in the black community at some point was born and raised in church.
Yeah.
Jamie says now, I may not been in church in a while, but there's something wrong with this. And everybody got up and they were shouting, but they weren't shouting. They were dancing in a rhythm simultaneously that seemed to be coerced, like almost like puppets to a string. And they stayed there until after service and noticed, hey, wait. And then this one gets interesting. And I'm going to get in trouble for wording it this way, but they showed it in the movie. And the white Jesus finger is pointing, strangely enough, in the painting, is pointing to the area where the button is at on the Lord's Supper table that they should push, and the elevator will come up. Now, we can turn this, that I'm going to touch on turning it a little bit, that is really depicting of the colonizer's ability to whitewash everything, including the scriptures, everything, and bring us to a level of that zombie apocalypse perspective where we just go to sleep and we're asleep to, and then when we're awakened, we become many of us become defensive and are now portrayed as the angry black person versus taking it for what it is and say, hey, let's look at that historical education to it, educational aspect to it, and look back at, wait a minute, how was this originally? And how is it now? You can understand that everyone, based on a geological structure where the scriptures were written, that everyone is of a darker skin without having to attack white folks for it. But understand, but they bring it to church and then notice what they end up dealing with. It was in the grape juice.
Yes.
The poison was in the grape juice. The grape juice, we can stay on this 15 hours right here. The grape juice represents the spilled blood. We had grape juice in Catholic Church, they have wine, and some other churches they have wine. But they bring it to the grape juice in the black church that represent the spilled blood. And I'm just going to throw this out there and we can break it down however you like. Satan comes to church, and Satan has the propensity and ability to always target the sacred things of God and pollutes it. Even when he's tempting Jesus in the wilderness, he takes Jesus to church into the holy city, takes him on top of the Pentacle, and used the scriptures partly to get Jesus, ready for this, to commit suicide. It is written. Now cast yourself down, for it is written that the angels have charge over thee. And he went through the whole scripture of Psalms 91 verse. He left off the part that says, will keep thee in all thy ways. Because his goal was, Jesus, kill your full self. In church, the enemy gets us to overlook the obvious, for we can go back to sleep while we're being polluted and bamboozled and brainwashed to what colonizers have done and taken away from us as a people through the power of the church. I'm going to stop it there. What's your take on that, with that church scene?
I think the unfamiliar atmosphere for a prostitute, a pill pusher, and a pimp, they realized something was different. This is not church as usual. This is not how church was when I used to go here. Something's different. And immediately I thought about what was in their cup. What was in their cup. And really, it wasn't praise, shouting, or dancing.
Yeah.
It was really club-like tunes.
Right.
And they were all looking at the pastor, and he was saying, trust, if I'm not mistaken, trust. He wasn't saying trust in God, trust in Jesus. It was really trusting what was in their cup. Because they're thinking, oh, this is symbolizing the blood. No, this is symbolizing Satan coming in. The devil came in. And then when I saw the painting of the Michelangelo, Jesus, I always remember how now we've been conveyed as if Jesus is a NRA, gun-toting, blue jean, blue-eyed Jesus. The Revelation doesn't reveal the brown-skinned Palestinian Jew who was born in Bethlehem and raised in Nazareth. So I often ask, what's in our cup? Because we've always been sort of guided to believe that white is right And anytime any black church leader would say anything, white evangelicals will dismiss it and they'll disagree with it. And unfortunately, we've just been drinking their cup. So we need to get back to realness, real depiction, real language of Scripture. And we aren't making the Bible black. We're showing the blackness in the Bible.
Right.
So I think that's a mistake and a misstep that many have, and so many people are drinking from this cup of, I believe in the white, I'm following the white, white is the way, and they're really not going with Jesus is the way. So that was my take on the whole church scene in a short way.
I thought about the juice one. I think it was Fontaine who grabbed in the boxes that were being delivered. So I'm wondering how much of that was connected to the church because of him grabbing the grape juice. And, people love grape juice.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so much sugar. But I also want to point out that the so-called dancing, which was somewhat erotic as well,
Right.
it showed a distraction while in church. And even while the preacher's saying trust, there was this erotic dancing. Now, listen, not that I have anything against erotic dancing. I just think that's something like that. When I say against it, that doesn't mean I abhor it. I want to make that clear, or support it, I should say. But I just think that that was all designed in that place, in that space, in that time, in that sanctuary to be an element of distraction. That's how I saw it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you mentioned distraction, he mentioned the cup. And I'm thinking of the distraction of that's what Satan does.
Yeah.
He distracts us from our purpose. And that's what he tried to do to Jesus, would distract him from the purpose. Even by his own cousins who said, hey, one would like to sit on the right and the other on the left in the kingdom. And he says, can you drink from the cup that I have to drink from?
Yeah.
It's all imperative, and it's all something we overlook. But it comes together harmoniously into the battle we face as children of God. We can't have one without the other. In the whole philosophy of the Chinese, the yin and the yang, evil and good doesn't oppose each other, they overlap. And so we can't have one without the other. It tends to cause a problem, and it's strange. And I'm always giving movie references and television references, but it makes sense. There was an episode in Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek when they went to a place and their evil side was separated from their good side. Their alter ego was separated in the transporter room. And Spock and Kirk and I believe McCoy and Uhura, not McCoy, Sulu, they all got shifted and their evil side got taken from them. And what they discovered towards the middle of the show, that they were dying on both sides because they could not have one without the other. The antagonist and the protagonist had to be in one body. Now, that doesn't say evil and good resonates within our body simultaneously, but we have the option of evil and good to choose. We're the only beings that has the options. Choose ye this day who you will serve. We're the only ones that have the option to choose what we're going to do. And so, in looking at this, it is interesting as we bring this to a close of this movie. It is interesting that what we're faced with in today's time is that God is coming back around to a situation where, as he said, when Jesus said, hey, if you don't praise me, the rocks will cry out. God is bringing us back to a time that if the church as we know has become sleep, have fallen asleep, that he will raise up a pimp, prostitute, and drug pusher
Yeah.
to do the will to wake us back up, that we've been in church too long from a religious standpoint of how now I'm not preaching yet, I'll do that tomorrow, but church too long as a religious standpoint until we have become cloned to the organized chaos in the society. And that's what we have been. I thank you both for being with us on this segment. This can go deeper. We had an hour, but this could turn into a seminar class because there's so much to take from this. We can even start taking from it. Did the church sell out? And we as leaders, did we sell out? The scary part is I'm remembering, as we bring it to a close, I'm remembering when even Dr. King sat down and said, as they had the victory of the voting rights and everything, and he realized after doing all of this, these white folks still hate us. And he said, did I bring my people into a burning house? It's not that we can't blend in with white folks and white folks can't blend in with us, but we ought to be able to individually appreciate each other's cultures, celebrate each other's cultures, and then be able to stand within each other's culture as partnership. We can't include because it won't work the same, but as partnership, that you can work with me on my side and I can work with you on your side. And when it comes down to humanity and human issues, we will band together to work together on issues, because you can't make me be you and I can't make you be me. But we can appreciate one another's culture, respect one another's history, and do not ignore it. Do not pretend like it does not exist. Do not colonize our culture because you're afraid of what our culture may do to yours. And so we have to be woke and realize that we may see ourselves walking down the street cloned by those who has the power over us. Thank you. Until next time on the Worldview TV talk show, we're glad again to have Pastor Camp and Minister Lee with us. Until next time, God bless. Stay woke and stay vigilant.